Parking will come up a lot. The casinos, and now we're going to get into where there's going to be a lot more that we'll see in succession, but the two casinos, I will remind you, as of last summer when they were both planned for the riverfront, each one was planned to have between 4,000 and 5,000 cars apiece. That's nearly one car for every slot machine as each slot machine drove. So as we're coming down there, this is the Cramp Shipyard building slated for demolition, which is unfortunate. By 1950, Philadelphia, which was about 2 million people, was thought to become, they thought that by now we'd be a city of 2.5 million. So they were really kind of building infrastructure for a much larger, a bigger city, a more kind of denser metropolis. We're now barely 1.5 million. So you have the Delaware Power Station, which is operating at about 20% of its capacity. But it is a significant civic building. If you think of the Tate Modern in London and many other industrial buildings around the world that have been repurposed. We're now adjacent to Penn Treaty Park, 8 acres, the only other formal green space. Of course, Conrail Lands has gone green, but the only other formal green space, part of the Fairmount Park system, the legendary site of Penn's treaty with the Indians. We're coming up on a whole series of what are called piers, even though they look like fast land. And again, part of the debate right now is how do you actually determine what's land, what's controlled by riparian rights by the state. Where's the bulkhead line? Where's the pier head line? Do we go to the Secretary of War's definition of the edge of the river in 1942? Do we go to the last time the river was actually kind of charted? There's a whole variety of conflicting definitions, but that's all going to come into play as we begin the master planning process, or the Planning Commission does. This is a gated complex. In order to get to the river's edge, you have to live there. Here was an example of somebody who, because there was no public amenity, had to cordon it off, feeling that this was an area that was not safe, and in order to get people to buy the condominiums, created a gated community. But once he saw the ideas we were presenting for public access, public streets, parks, and open spaces, said to us that if had that been in place, or even thought about when he was developing this, he would have developed his property differently, which is, I think, a nice affirmation of the principles of the vision. We're then coming up on a series of piers that have become restaurants, recreation, and where we launched from. Dave & Buster's is right there, and you can see Captain Lucky's other boat just to the left. Skyline, which is a really quite a beautiful skyline, and again the views from the river. And you begin to see the beginning of some marine and residential life with some of the marinas. We're going to go past piers 3 and 5, which are being converted to condominiums. And I think this starts to give you the sense of what could be dotted throughout here as we think of a mixed-use waterfront over the next 10, 20, 30 years with a variety of different activities and scales, but clearly an active, public, and energized riverfront for boating, kayaking, recreational uses, and giving it that kind of vibrancy that you see in cities around the world. Again, some of the older industrial buildings, you can see one which is just to the left of, sort of at 2 o'clock, just to the left of Waterfront Square, called Hoboken Brownstone. The proposal in 2006 was to tear that down and build a 40-story building, just to the right of that or to the north of it. There was a proposal for a 900-foot tower, which would be as tall as the Comcast building, called Bridgman's View. This was all in the heady days before the crash, when there was significant kind of speculation and entitlement of properties that was going on in order to raise value in anticipation of the casino license being granted. The incredible Ben Franklin Bridge, originally the Delaware River Bridge. Paul Cray, who was head of architecture at the University of Pennsylvania for many years, when Luke Kahn was there. Paul Craig had an absolutely indelible imprint on the physical fabric of Philadelphia. He did everything from bridges to parks, Rittenhouse Square. He did libraries and you name it. This was somebody whose hand has shaped our image of contemporary Philadelphia. Pier 9, Pier 11, there it is, the first public space, and that will be a result of the civic visioning process. Nearly an acre. We have some of the top design firms in the country vying to make our public space. That's a pretty amazing thing when you saw that last night. Pier 9, 1904 Municipal Pier will be thought of in conjunction with Pier 11 and the Water Department across the street in terms of the urban design context, and perhaps might become part of the adaptive reuse. Piers 3 and 5 developed in, I don't know the exact time, but 80s, 84, thank you. The remainder of the ill-fated tram to Camden that was part of the two cities, one river concept that the Delaware River Port Authority was putting forth to land over by the Victory Building, or Victor Building, which has been restored by Carl Dranoff. And over here, actually 7 stories above the air on a parking structure that included the Police Touch Museum on top of Penn's Landing. $18 million has gone into this already. What should be the significant public gathering space in Philadelphia at the river's edge is literally a parking lot. And it's a parking lot because you can't get there. Once you get there, it's very difficult to kind of get up and back and do anything. It has failed to develop over 40 years for a variety of reasons. Economic, political, there's the corruption trial. We've talked about at least two folks have gone to jail because of Penn's Landing machinations. It is it's a sorry reminder of I think best intentions gone awry, and so the focus right now really is on smaller projects like Pier 11, the master planning, and ultimately figuring out how we can make this an integral part of the city. We put so much effort into it. Port of History Museum built either in time for or just after the bicentennial. When you do this stuff long enough, you hear all sorts of stories like this one about how Governor Schaap added the auditorium to that building at the last minute. It wasn't really planned for it. I don't know if that's an apocryphal story or not, but there's all kinds of Penn's Landing, the Seaport Museum certainly have all sorts of political people who have touched it. There's bananas that come in. There's a lot of food distribution that comes in to the Port of Philadelphia.
It's kind of small.
We're coming up against what looks like a reminder that this is a working river, and the Delaware is not only a tidal river, it goes up and down about 7 feet every day, but it's also a major working port. And the International Longshoremen's Association, we're an active part of the planning process, sometimes vociferously getting their points across in terms of protecting port interests, but the planning process itself and the vision as it was put forward ensured that the port, particularly south of Snyder Avenue, remained a working port. There's the Coast Guard Station, which has been there, the building itself for 25 years, but what's most important is that the U.S. Navy was born here at the foot of Washington Avenue. And so some kind of federal naval presence has been here as long as there has been a federal naval presence. The Penn's Landing Corporation owns a little, I think it's Pier 57 South, which is somewhat naturalized, returning to nature literally. That's the end of the Penn's Landing holdings.